Okay, this is the Skywing 55-inch EPP slick, and I'm going to do a build and a fly video on this. I got this from Hobbyking. And here's a little shot of what's in the box. Looks pretty nice. This will be my sixth EPP hybrid build and the largest at 55 inches, but they're all pretty similar. Here's my electronics. I'm using a Dualsky motor, 4255, 505 kV. I've got a Gecko 65 amp. For servos on the aileron, rudder, and elevator, I'm using these Coronas. And for the elevator, I'm using a RotorStar. The first step is to install the motor box. It goes on right like that. And I glue it in with CA to start. Now we install the 4 reinforcement pieces for the motor box. I put one each in the corner of the motor box, all 4 corners. And the last 3 reinforcements are glued in using epoxy. There, and there. Okay, I added some additional carbon fiber 1x6mm pieces on the motor box just to beef it up a little bit. And also added CA to all the joints that I could reach in here, just to kind of further secure everything up. Then we cut out the plywood and the EPP from the interior of the cowl. And we install the cowl. These little wooden hooks here fit into these notches. And then we test fit the canopy, and the little pins here fit into these holes right here in the cowl. It's a fairly good fit. Okay, I went ahead and installed the motor. And the speed controller is hooked up now. Can move that later if it needs more cooling. I think it's going to be fine right there. And then we put the cowl back on to make sure that the motor clears it. Pretty well centered. This plane has wire landing gear, which is pretty much bulletproof, unbreakable compared to carbon fiber that's usually used on these planes. Just fits right down into this slot, and the wooden wedge fits in. We install the aileron next. There's 5 hinge slots all the way down the trailing edge of the wing, and some of them were not cut all the way through the wood, so I use a little knife here and just punch them through the rest of the way. Ailerons are now installed, and I just used goop and pushed it in there with a screwdriver into each hinge slot, and then work very quickly and attach the aileron, push it in. Wing roots are glued on each wing. Next, I glued the aileron control horns using epoxy. Cut out the tail piece for the horizontal stabilizer to fit in, right here and here. Then glue the elevator onto the horizontal stabilizer. I like goop again. 3, 4, 5, 6 hinges. And there is no EPS core in the horizontal stabilizer. It is EPP, so there's no problem using goop. It's glued into place, and I had to put a few pins in there to just kind of straighten it out. It was warped just a little bit, but that'll keep it straight until the goop sets up. Glue the control horn onto the elevator. And onto the rudder. I'm using epoxy. Slide the horizontal tail assembly in. Now I temporarily install the wing tube and the wings. Now we can glue the tail assembly, and I can measure from the wing tip to the tail on one side and the other wing tip to the other tail side to make sure that they're even, and then we can go ahead and glue the tail assembly in. We screw the eye bolt into the bottom of the rudder for the tail wheel assembly. I add a little bit of goop to the eye bolt just to further secure it. Now we test fit the rudder. And I'll glue it on here in a moment. And I'll place the tail wheel assembly on there just to make sure everything is about right. It's glued and pinned in place while the glue is curing. Got a little dab of goop here on the wheel axle, just to keep the tail wheel from falling off, and I do that on all my wheels. It's better than losing them in the air and having to order new ones. Now I'll put the tail wheel assembly on and screw it in. Tail wheel's on, and we put this little piece right back in here. That's glued in with goop. And that's pretty much it for the airframe. Everything looks pretty true. Rudder servo is installed. We have 90 degrees on the push rod and the arm for the servo. That's very important. And it's also important that the rudder is centered. Later, after we arm the servos, we can use our sub-trim to retain that 90 degrees in the event that it's off a little bit. And the same thing on the elevator servo. We've got 90 degrees between the servo arm and the push rod. And also the elevator is centered with the horizontal stabilizer. So we're good to go there. Okay, the next step is to bind the receiver to the transmitter. And that's been done. So the servos are now armed. Now I can take the arms and put them back on. And I'll get it at 90 degrees. And the servo arm is installed to the servo. So now I need to set the sub-trim to lift the elevator up until it's perfectly in line with the stabilizer. So the sub-trim for the elevator is at 0 right now. And we're off just a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and start turning the sub-trim up. You can see how it causes the elevator to go up and down. So we'll try and get it right until it's right even. Alright, that looks like it's about right. We'll do the same thing for the rudder. And now that the sub-trim is done on the elevator, we'll go ahead and adjust the travel. Right now it's at 100%. Let's see what that looks like. I want full travel. I could go a little higher on that. Just a little bit more on that. We'll increase the travel up and down. We'll try 120%, see how that looks. I'll back off just a little bit. Okay, we'll try that. Yeah, that's pretty good. We got full travel. Very good. Okay, we'll adjust the sub-trim on the rudder. You can see there's a little bit of right trim on there, sub-trim. So we'll go over here, and we need to bring that over to the left. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Now we'll adjust the travel on the rudder. There's left, there's right. Need a little more on both. I've got the travel for the rudder on here, and we'll try that. That's pretty good. I want it to almost touch the elevator. That's perfect. So we'll go ahead and lock that in. The aileron servos are now installed, and the sub-trims are adjusted as well as the travel, just like we did on the elevator. Build is completed. Okay, the batteries are back as far as I can get them. I've got two straps holding them down to make sure they can't wiggle. CG is marked on the wing. I'm about 1/4 of an inch forward of that, but I think that'll be okay, and we'll check it out and see how it does. Batteries are connected. Here's our aileron throws. Elevator. And our rudder. And our throttle. Alright, let's maiden it. Maiden flight of the Slick 55. A little bit windy. We're going to give her a try here. Alright, get it trimmed out. Not too bad. A little bit of right rudder. Down seems pretty good. Let's see how she handles slow flight here.
tossed around a little bit from the wind, but it's a big airframe. It seems to be pretty stable.